our former Upper Neuse Riverkeeper, Matthew Starr. Many of you may know, but if you missed the information coming from Sound Rivers a month ago, Matthew has gone back to graduate school and is doing research at NC State, going back to his farming roots, I guess you might say. So Matthew is at graduate school to do some work to conduct research on the ways farmers can support soil health and also protect water quality. So he's still working in the space of protecting water quality, but from a different angle of supporting the agricultural community here in North Carolina. He has also been hired as a part of his graduate program by a company called IQ Biologics, and he's the research and development associate for this company. So his new role is in research, doing lab and field trial research, as well as literature review of how farmers can reduce their inputs into the environment and replace harmful synthetic fertilizers and inputs such as pesticides or fertilizers with biological ones. And so we welcome Matthew back with us tonight, and I will pass it off to you.
All right, I'll share my screen in a moment, but I'm very happy to be here. And again, please interrupt me if you have a question. I do not mind. And we'll try to stay pretty, high level here. And but some of it will get down into the nitty gritty of some science. I will say that a lot of this science and research is still developing. So if there is a question, I may not know the answer, but I can certainly get back to you. And with that, I will share my screen. Vale, if you'll give me a thumbs up that it worked. Can y'all see? All right, sweet. So, as Heather said, I'm in graduate school at NC State in the Crop and Soils Department, which is really awesome. Great research is going on, and we'll get into some of that. I am very interested, having done water quality for 10 years and then going back to school previously for soil science. I was really intrigued by two things. One, two keywords, regenerative agriculture and biostimulants. So as I started reading more about the tenets of regenerative agriculture and the best management practices associated with that type of farming, I got hooked into biostimulants and what they are able to achieve. Now, biostimulants is a very broad category of organic or usually plant-derived inputs into the agricultural system that can stimulate growth, stimulate soil health. Again, there's another term that has not been defined, that is soil health. But we're going to talk about it in terms of soil function. I got to get on there. We go. So the agricultural best management practices that I am most interested in looking at in conjunction with biostimulants are what you see on the screen. Now, we've talked a lot in our history of agriculture and environmentalism in North Carolina with different types of crop rotations, using a diverse crop rotation, cover crops, using not only using cover crops, but using the right kind of cover crops and cover crop mixtures. There is all kinds of research being done around different cover crops, intercropping, which is when you have your row of like a maize and then a row of a second crop, and biostimulants that we'll of course talk about. And then inputs. So, your typical applications of pesticides, and I'll use pesticides to describe herbicides, insecticides, all the sides generally as pesticides, and then synthetic fertilizers. And there's been a lot of research and work done in North Carolina around tillage. And so tillage is really broken down into conventional tillage, and conservation tillage. There's some things in between like strip till, but generally speaking tonight, when I say tillage, I'll be talking about either traditional tillage or conservation tillage. And tillage is the breaking up of the agricultural soil so you get a good seed to soil contact. And when you are using no-till, it's important to have the right equipment, which is a no-till seed drill, and you're hopefully planting that into cover crops. And what we saw in the 1990s and early 2000s, in mid 2000s, is a lot of implementation of conservation tillage. We have actually seen a decrease in that conservation tillage program throughout North Carolina and generally in the Southeast, which means we are degrading our soil. Now, there's some crops where you need a certain amount of tillage, thinking more of sweet potatoes, peanuts, but there are some really cool researchers, and it's not really being done in North Carolina that I know of, around no-till or minimal till for peanuts and sweet potatoes, which is kind of mind-boggling since they are below the surface of the soil, but it's really cool. And so, like I said, I would say that those are the main tenets of regenerative agriculture. There's the cover crops, conservation tillage, and a good crop rotation. And I started looking at, well, what can you do to reduce abiotic stress of cropping systems in terms of an input? Instead of, we can generally know the yield increase and the soil health function associated with conservation tillage as a solid crop rotation and cover crops. But is there something else that we can give farmers as a tool to reduce different stresses? We'll talk tonight primarily about increased salinity caused by saltwater intrusion of our coastal farmland as one of the research focuses for biostimulants. And so that other is biostimulants. And again, biostimulants is a very broad category of inputs, that farmers can use. And there's a couple of different ways in which biostimulants can be used. They can be used as a foliar application, which is a spraying method, or they can be used in furrow, which is a ground application method. So there's been a good amount of research with biostimulants. The caveat there is a lot of that has not been done in the United States. And there's, like I said, there's many different types of biostimulants. You can have, fungal biostimulants. You can have amino acid based biostimulants through protein hydrolysis. You can have biostimulants from seaweed, biostimulants from cacao plants, biostimulants from all kinds of things, and really trying to understand the impact that application is going to have on yield, as well as the reduction of stress caused by abiotic factors, drought or increased rainfall or heat or salinity. And as you can see here on the screen, biostimulants have generally been found as one of the most promising and one of the focuses that the scientific community needs to make for reducing the impact of stresses, whether that's caused by climate change or whether it's a bad growing season due to less rainfall or to increased heat. And what got me very interested in this is NC State is just now starting to understand the impact, or starting to look at to try to understand the impact of increased salinity on coastal agricultural lands, which to me, this type of research lends itself. I mean, it's not a magic pill, right? But we need to keep current agricultural land viable. We are increasing population and we are decreasing viable agricultural land, and usually that's through changing that agricultural land use into something else, mainly development. And so we have to figure out as a society and a scientific community how to make agricultural land have better yields without degrading the environment. And the initial research shows that biostimulants can be a very useful tool to increase use or to increase yield, keep that land in production, keep it viable, keep it profitable, which is very important. We can have the most sustainable agricultural system in the world, but if we don't have farmers in business, well, that doesn't really amount to a whole lot, as well as not degrading the environment, not degrading the soil locally, and not creating runoff affecting our waterways. And again, primarily they are used as a foliar application. So you very low ratio of biostimulant product mixed in with water, and that is sprayed on crops during key growing times. I'm currently doing research trials with soybeans, and so you want to apply fairly early in a growth stage. You want to apply at flowering, and then apply at seed stage. And the product that IQ Biologics has developed is IQ40. This is from a field trial in Bolivia, and you can see the application versus the control. And it's kind of hard to see right there, but obviously you're getting a lot more of mass, which is good. That plant is doing its photosynthesis. We're getting a very good carbon and nitrogen exchange. We're sinking more carbon into the soil. And it's kind of disappointing on this picture, but the roots, it's all about the roots. And getting a good root stand, whether we're talking about maize or beans or what have you, that good root soil interaction is really key. And one of the other things that we're very interested in studying is I've got a pretty awesome team at NC State. I got the fungus team and I got the seed team. And so how that works together is it's kind of useless in a research setting to talk just about fertilization without talking about the fungal community that is below the soil, because that plays everything to do with nutrients for plants and high functioning soils. Now, this is a pretty convoluted graph here, but it's actually one of the simplest ones that show how much of a network there are through the mycorrhizae community. And we are primarily focused, I'm primarily focused on this group here, which, as you can see, we got cotton, we got maize, and we have soybean. And what they do is it's a very interesting, very complex, but highly regulated function that the plant allows the mycorrhizal fungi and the hyphae into the plant. It's not the fungus doesn't colonize the plant, right? The plant is the mechanism that controls this function. And when you start talking about abiotic stresses to plants, it's how can we reduce that stress to increase yield? Yes, we have a biostimulant that feeds the microbial community. But what is a microbial community introduction that we can do to achieve even greater stress tolerance? And so I'll be doing some seed trials and some greenhouse trials at different salinity levels, um, looking at seed treatments or soil application or foliar application at different salinity levels with obviously a control. So, nothing with, so a group of experiments with no inputs. We're going to look at a group of plants with just the biostimulant as a treatment, and then also a biostimulant with a beneficial fungal treatment. And that's what's really cool, because that's, to my knowledge, has not been done. And we're all very excited to conduct that research, but we are still trying to figure out how to conduct that research. And it gets pretty complicated. Um, but it's not impossible. It's not something that takes millions of dollars to do. It's not something that, we have to create a new method for or anything like that. We don't have to make a new scientific discovery in order to do this. But what we'll hopefully show is that we have a greater seed germination rate, and we have a greater yield and higher in a more higher functional soil system, supporting that plant, and therefore supporting a healthier environment. We won't be having as much runoff, whether that's phosphorus or nitrogen or soil loss. We have done a very bad job of keeping our soils on agricultural lands, as well as degrading that soil. And this is where tillage is important, tillage that we talked about earlier, because the compaction of that plow pan or that tillage through conventional tillage destroys the microbial community and just really reduces the function, which then causes you to rely more heavily on synthetic inputs. So if we can keep that microbial community happy, healthy, and hopefully stimulated through different treatments, then we can have a much higher functional agricultural system in a healthier environment. And this is my tree is supposed to be slid over here to the right a little bit. I guess it got messed up when the slide got bigger. But again, this has everything, well, not everything, but it has a lot to do with a changing climate and a higher functional system. And it's the reciprocal reward. And so if we can increase that function, then as you can see here, we can sink more carbon into our agricultural system, which is a very good thing. And it's something that hopefully the government creates or private industry creates a method for paying farmers to have these ecological functions that benefit us all. And so hopefully that is something that is handled in the 2023 Farm Bill. And so this is affecting North Carolina. This is a story from the Washington Post, I believe last year or the year before. And you all at Sound Rivers will recognize the name here. I guess I can't highlight it. Alex there at ECU. So ECU starting to look at this, in NC State is getting some research plots on some coastal county farms that have had just tremendous loss to saltwater intrusion. So basically, your soil is is increasing in salinity. And if that happens, then that agricultural system that we are depending on to grow things we need, food and fiber, is not able to do that. So that puts more pressure on other agricultural lands, which just creates a snowball effect of needing more from less, which is very hard to do without damaging not only your local agricultural ecosystem, but your ecosystem in general. And that's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, we're seeing higher levels of salinity in agricultural soils, and we will continue to do so. So hopefully I can help solve a little bit of that stress that is brought on by increased salinity. And I shouldn't say I, because it's not just me, it's a big we here. And this is, I guess I should have had this picture up when I was talking a minute ago. This is a drone image of those fields, and you can see the bands, and you can see where it's not productive. Obviously, there's the ocean, or that might be. Honestly, I can't remember if that's the ocean or the sound. But anyways, these are the field plots in which we're seeing that damage caused by salinity. So this is a lot, right? This is, and you don't need, I'll leave it up there long enough if you want to read it. And I definitely won't read to you because you'll go to sleep and I'll go to sleep. But the key here is that not only do you have an increase of salinity, which, as we've just talked about, that's bad for agricultural production. But the key here is it's not just about salinity. It's about the reactions that happen with salinity. And it increases your level of CO2, which, as we all know, is a greenhouse gas leading to climate change. And number 4 there is key. The implications are a future net increase in greenhouse gas production through CO2 emissions. And this is all from a really awesome paper that was just a year or two old that was in Nature. That highlights why we should be paying attention to salinity, not only in terms of agricultural production, but in terms of impacts to the climate and to the overall ecosystems. So we want to sink more carbon in agricultural soils. We want to increase soil function and therefore yield of agricultural lands. And we definitely don't want to increase the amount of greenhouse gas emission through agricultural systems or in soil systems. And biostimulants play a role in all of this. And the hope is that through some of these trials, we can show a reduction in that stress. We can create a cost-effective means for farmers to use on their land, that they can keep that land viable. And that is everything in a nutshell. Are there any else? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm happy to reshare if someone wants to revisit a slide, but I can't see anyone or any hands raised. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And if you have any questions, please ask. Again, this is, I hesitate to say the word cutting edge because it just sounds so, like we're patting ourselves on the back, but it's research that we are now just learning a lot about. And I
Matthew,
hope that
we do have one question from Ezekiel Overbow. Are there ever situations where permanently inundated land and biomass hold carbon in the soil, i.e. because it's anaerobic and there is no carbon released to the atmosphere?
Yeah, but it had to be anaerobic for quite some time. And again, we want to keep current agricultural land in production. And so, yes, like, wetlands, if you dry a wetland and disturb it, then yes, you lose that function of carbon sequestration. But we want to keep lands. We need to keep growing things. If we keep losing agricultural land because of the loss of viable production, then we're going to be in a world of hurt, both with food and fiber, and we're going to depend on those other agricultural lands to produce more, which relies further on synthetic inputs. SOC is soil organic carbon. Sorry, I should have had that in there.
So feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. If you're shy and don't want to ask a question by unmuting yourself, you can chat it and we can have it answered that way.
John?
If there's anyone that wants to go ahead and unmute, I will pause for a second.
Yeah, hey Matt, how's it going? John Hoban here. We haven't seen you out in Harnett County for a while, so it's nice to see you online at least. Yeah, I just had a quick question. I know you brought up cover crops early on, and I know they're kind of a hard sell for some operations to make that work on the balance sheet, whether it's seed costs or just the operations to take care and manage and then get that green out of the way. Do you see like a spot for biostimulants or maybe a selling point for them that they might be cheaper for some growers and some rotations where cover crops just don't make sense as far as the balance sheet?
Yeah, I guess I would. Maybe if I was making the sales pitch, I maybe wouldn't say this, but I would say I don't think biostimulants should be replacing cover crops. Cover crops, so we're learning more. We're developing better cover crop mixes, and again using a good crop rotation as well as a diverse crop rotation. So not just doing the same rotation growing season after growing season after growing season, but changing it up with some good cover crop mixes. What I would love to see more of is animal farmers with row crop farmers who grow a cover crop, who bring in cattle or large ruminants or small ruminants, and then mob graze that cover crop that then your commercial crop is planted into. Now you could also have cover crops that do have a financial benefit for harvest. One of the coolest ones that we're starting to learn about is hemp. It has a very short growing season. You can plant 60,000 fibrous hemp plants per acre, and again, that's a commodity. And if they're doing a typical commercial crop rotation, you don't need additional machinery to do hemp production. You need a sickle bar mower. You need to put it in windwarders to dry. You need to bale it, and it's a really high production in terms of dollars per acre crop.
I didn't know that folks were at that high plant population. That kind of brings up another point about spacing. I know for a while there, folks were on 6-foot rows with hemp. I don't know if that's still the case or not, but that's a wide row. That's a lot of weed. That's a lot of daylight to weed on top of.
Yeah, so that's generally for your CBD and flower production.
Okay.
If you're doing fiber, I mean, you're doing as close as you can get those plants together. Okay. And they're really cool as a cover crop too, because of the point you just made. They have great weed suppression because, you know, they're not allowing that sunlight. And they have a pretty deep root system too that can help break up hard pans and whatnot.
Too neat. Yeah. Well, I'll leave you alone. That's really interesting stuff, Matt. Nice to see you.
Yeah, shoot me an email.
Will do.
I'll talk your ear off.
Matthew, you have another question from Ezekiel and a comment. Awesome to see such important research. Look forward to hearing the results of the impact of fungi on stress tolerance. What
Me too.
fungi are you looking at?
Oh God. So we'll go back to this, and there's a few that are really interesting. These are AM fungi, and I won't butcher the name there.
Arbuscular.
Yeah, even if I say it slow, I get in my own head and I can't get out the words.
It's always different when you're in the audience versus when you're on the podium.
Yeah. So some AM fungi, which is really what Dr. Garcia looks at and researches at NC State. He threw something else out at me today. It's kind of another fungi that we're learning a lot about. And I'm of course blanking on the name right now, but you're looking for one that has good properties associated with whatever stress you're looking at, and is able to colonize a wide host, or not colonize, but influence a wide host of plants. And because that way it's more viable and farmers can use it. There's another species that's not an AM, that's Trichoderma. Trichoderma is a type of fungi that there's a lot of scientific literature out. You know, it's been heavily studied. We know a lot about it. We know a lot about the different strands of Trichoderma. So we're hopefully going to be able to get some of that in the lab, and then see how that interacts see how those different strands that we've targeted, mainly for salinity, to see how that interacts with biostimulants. But you know, Trichoderma also has some antifungal properties, and
right.
So we have to be. I mean, obviously, we're not just going to throw, you know, a dart at the wall and see what it sticks on, but we're going to make an educated guess and then see how it goes. So yeah, I'll keep everyone as soon as we have something cool, we'll definitely share it.
Cool. Yeah, Matt, this is Zeke, by the way. I was the one to ask the question about the species, and I'm glad to hear you're looking at Trichoderma. Like, I've got experience in the greenhouse trades too, and people are pretty much convinced already now, like in ornamentals and other nursery crops, that like they go ahead and just, if they can find a cheap enough product of Trichoderma, they just apply it because they feel it works.
Yeah, and it's the other nice thing about Trichoderma is that it's fairly stable. And obviously, we're trying to make a product that farmers can use that you know, that doesn't have a 6-day shelf life, which is fairly prohibitive to agricultural uses. So, you know, we're learning a lot. You know, there was a paper that came out not too long ago that wasn't really good for. It was a good paper. Don't get me wrong, but it showed that there wasn't, you know, you did these practices for one season with the fungal application, you didn't really see an increase in yield. So again, this isn't the magic pill, but this is looking at a new model of how we can combat stress over time, over multiple growing seasons.
Cool.
Yeah, shoot me an email. I'd love to learn more about the greenhouse stuff you've done.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, I'll just take a moment here to see if anyone else has a question they'd like to unmute and ask or put in the chat. Otherwise, I have one for Matthew in a moment. Matthew just put his NC State email in the chat, so if you can see that, you can grab that. So I'm going to come out of the weeds, Matt, and ask a question, just kind of a broader question. I know you've been thinking about the impacts of climate change on the agricultural community, especially those that have, working lands, maybe marginal working lands now. What do you see as kind of what's making it most difficult for farmers, agricultural community with respect to the changes by climate change? And then also, how does that further impact our waterways?
I'm sorry, you broke up right when you said agricultural communities.
Yeah, internet at the office, no doubt. So what's making it most difficult right now? Like, how is climate change making it harder for farmers? But then also, how is climate change, and all of that potentially impacting our waterways more from, agriculture sector and those difficulties they're facing?
Yeah, so it's what climate change has done is taken the predictability out, right? So farmers, I mean, even the farmers I work with now who are more adaptable to changing how they farm. One of my guys, he's not that much older than me, still uses the farmer's almanac as a method of, when of my soil temperatures are going to be where I need to plant, so forth and so on. And so the predictability, it seems, well, it doesn't seem, it is more often that we're getting flooding not from catastrophic events, but just from a day of rain. And so being able to know when to make your applications so that A, you're not wasting money, and B, or co-A, you're not polluting, you're not having runoff. And the key there is, again, that crop rotation and that cover crop is keeping that soil covered. We want to keep the soil on the ground, or not on. We want to keep we want to keep the soil on the field, and we want to keep any inputs that are applied within the system and not leaching through the system or running off the system. So it's tough. And the more products or management practices we can give farmers to reduce that stress, the better.
Right. Don't be shy, folks. No question is too simple or obviously too technical, as for Matt. So feel free to unmute and ask a question if you like, or put one in the chat. I guess another quick question is, what do you really see as the path forward as far as does this type of work or supporting farmers, do they need more funding themselves? Is this change in policy? Like, what are some of the things that you see is really helping to move the needle on supporting the agricultural community in their efforts to be more productive and be better, improve the impact on waterways?
Yeah, funding is important. Funding and information, and not just information on university research land. Research on farmers, with farmers, so that farmers can carry that information to their peers. I am not a farmer. And it means a whole lot more when a farmer hears from another farmer that something works. And so it's the education, but it's also the funding component. Now, we not only need to pay farmers for ecological services so that they can implement these practices that will all benefit our society and our planet in the long run. And I guess if I had a magic pill to use or a magic pen, I would definitely tackle the crop subsidies program that has led to a pretty monocultural cropping system, especially in the Midwest with your typical corn and soybean farms, because that is what is most profitable to grow. And as we know, that is primarily grown for agricultural animal feed, not direct human consumption. And so, yes, funding, paying farmers for ecological services, which I honestly do think, based on conversations that I've had with people, will be included in the next Farm Bill 2023. I don't think anyone has the appetite to tackle crop subsidies in the crop insurance program, but that is something that should definitely be tackled so that it's more profitable for farmers to implement these practices.
All right. Are there any other questions from anyone that they have for Matthew this evening?
Hopefully in a year, I'll come back and I'll tell you all that we've done great research. We have great products and, you know, we're reducing stress harm.
All right. Well, don't be shy while I'm doing this. If you have a question, feel free to ask it. But did want to thank Matthew very much for coming back and joining us tonight and learning about this wonderful research. So we're thankful for that. And I think indeed we will. We will make sure that we include in our communications in the future the results of this work and next steps. But so I appreciate everyone joining us, tonight. It was good to have you all. And just another reminder, our next Tell Me About It Tuesday is scheduled for October 12th at 7 o'clock. And topic is we're still working out on some schedules with some of our guests. So we'll announce that very soon about who will be joining us that evening. As Vail put in the chat, if you are not getting our e-news, our weekly e-news for information or opportunities or upcoming events, please visit our website at soundrivers.org. And also, this work that we do rely on donations and membership. So we're always would welcome any support that you can provide. And that can also be done at soundrivers.org. But again, thank you all for joining us. And if there's nothing else tonight, we'll sign off. And this will be recorded and we will send this out. So if you have some friends that you think are interested, feel free to share it with them. We'll be sending that out in the e-news this week and we'll be on our website. But thank you, Matthew. Good to see you. And
thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Bob. Good to see you. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It was a wonderful night. So take care.
Thank you all. Please email me.